Welcome in for another edition of Armchair Quarterback. I'm David Allen, joined as always by Coach Guy Suttle, and I might as well say joined as always by Paul Foster. Paul's sitting in again with us this week, but each week we talk about our 4 Cleveland County schools. We talk about what they did this past Friday night, and then we look ahead to what's coming up this coming Friday night, and we'll talk a little Gardner-Webb, college football, and hey, good news, we'll talk about the Carolina Panthers and they look like a pro team on Sunday. So we'll talk about the NFL and the Panthers in the last segment. And I'm going to tell you guys, as bad as we are in the rough part of the conference schedule for all 4 of our county teams, this first segment might be really short. Matter of fact, we might do the replay and the preview all before the first break today because I'm telling you what, beat down after beat down last Friday night. Let's start with Burns taking on taking on the previously unbeaten Highland Tech at 3-0. And I think I called it 45, Paul, and it was pretty close to that, 56-8 or 58-6. But either way, it was a big time blowout.
It was. The Bulldogs, as expected, took care of business. Rushed for 249. They were almost at 250. I think they passed for just over 150. So a strong night as expected against competition that we knew just wasn't going to hang around for long.
Yeah, and it is what it is. We've talked about it now this is the 4th year. We're finally, hopefully, going to rotate out of these conferences matchup. I mean, obviously, Crest and Kings Mountain are probably going to be happy to stay in the Big South, but there are some games even in the Big South that don't live up to much expectation. But Coach, Burns just way too much for Highland Tech.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of knew this going in. We've said it even prior to this that I'll take a 1-2 or a 1-1 Cleveland County team going against anybody undefeated. Case in point, Shelby versus Olympic. And so we knew that going in that this was not going to be the matchup that certainly Highland Tech was looking forward to. And I think about the only drama that was there Friday night was, well, not the lights were going to work.
56-8, the final score. Not much else that needs to be said about that one. Big win for Burns. The Bulldogs off this coming Friday night, so they will not have to fool with the possibility of moving a game based on the weather, as they will have this open week off. And congratulations to them for the big win. And we'll talk more about the Bulldogs in weeks to come for certain. Now let's talk about Crest and Ashbrook. That game was close. I mean, even at halftime, Paul, it looked like a dogfight type of ball game. I think it was 15-12 Crest maybe at halftime. Ends up the Chargers pull away in the second half, but this was a very competitive football game for most of the night.
David, it really was, and I think we talked about it last week, that it doesn't matter what season it is, if Ashbrook's record doesn't look so good, they always play Crest tough, and that was the case as they took the lead in the second quarter. But as you said, just before we went to halftime, a lot of people, and it'll be hopefully in the scenes, a Michael Edwards reception when he had 3 or 4 defenders standing in front of him. It was a Hail Mary from quarterback Turner McSwain that got Crest into the end zone, and that really seemed to just lift the Chargers as they got back the lead, went into the half, and then how they played the rest of the game in the second half.
Coach, I can't remember when I've seen Ashbrook on film, but that's a whole new look for them. That helmet, it doesn't have the big A, the block A on it anymore. I'm not even sure what that is, water droplets or something to go with the green wave. But needless to say, seeing some highlights here, Ashbrook looking fairly good again early in the ball game.
Here's your play.
Yeah, there's Edwards. Look how he goes up and just takes it away from it being intercepted and goes into the end zone. Incredible.
Yeah, that's a big-time play, Coach.
Yeah, and you know, that really turned the tide if you think about it, because Crest was down 12-7 at this point, and they go up 15 to 12, and then to come out in the second half and the defense made some adjustments, and that was it. I mean, it was 29-12. So, you know, Crest, I'll have to hand it to them that one, the halftime adjustments that they made on defense, and then they just wore down. They just wore down Ashbrook. And when Ashbrook got off the bus, when they come out to warm up, the first half, I mean, you're sitting there going, oh my gosh. I mean, they are big, they're physical. I thought it was going to be a tough night for the Chargers. And in a sense it was, but I was very, very proud and very impressed with how Crest handled the second half.
Well, and all that said, 29-12 the final, and so the Chargers end up, as far as final score is concerned, no concern there. Crest will move on to Stuart Kramer, and we'll talk about that here in just a couple minutes. Next up, Kings Mountain. Homecoming for the Mountaineers, an early homecoming game this year into September. There you see the Mountaineer Marching Band, decked out in the home gold uniforms for Kings Mountain against Hunter Huss. And Paul, this is one of those teams that, again, any given year kind of a thing that you can expect a good matchup, but the Huskies really no match for Kings Mountain on Friday night.
Yeah, not this time around. We wondered at the beginning of the season, could this be a Huss team that really did give some competition to the likes of Crest and Kings Mountain this season? But yeah, Kings Mountain got it going, had a big night, 236 yards passing, almost at 150 in the rushing department. And one of the guys on defense that now has 32 tackles on the season is Eli Lipscomb. So they've got so many key players that are helping them be very balanced right now.
Well, balance has been a key for Kings Mountain. We've talked about Josiah Hill in the running game. We've talked about Tex Vaughn there. We see him, number 15 in gold there, making that catch. We've talked about him in the receiving game. Armstrong has kind of stepped into that starting role now, Coach, and because of his comfort now, Kings Mountain is starting to be very balanced and looks very comfortable on offense.
Yes, and if you notice there, Hunter Huss scored on a special teams play, and that's where they are dangerous, is in the open field, as you can see right there. But Kings Mountain, with that balanced attack, Armstrong getting more and more comfortable at quarterback, is going to pay dividends for them in the long run. It really will.
Well, and obviously the defense stepping up. There was a safety there, Paul, and that's again, you got to be strong in all three phases: offense, defense, special teams. And Kings Mountain starting to get all that kind of coming together.
They really are, and that's a key point to how you stay a successful football team. Not always counting on your offense only, getting scores off your special teams, and just all the little things it takes to win.
No doubt about that. So the final on that one, 39-13, Kings Mountain over Hunter Huss. The Mounties will now take on North Gaston on Friday night again. That's the plan. We'll see about the rain and all that. We'll talk about that here in just a few minutes. Final game of the week, Shelby at Cherryville, and we got highlights of this one. My goodness, this might be the shortest highlight package in the history of Randy Evans shooting video there. Golden Lions coming out in the gold pants, and we got some good stories about the old school gold pants that Coach Taylor had that one time. But Coach, I mean, I don't know. Cherryville got, here we go, 87 yards on the first play for Shelby. After they stopped Cherryville, got the ball after the initial kickoff, and then go 87 on the first play. It's 7-0 at that point. 56-0 at halftime. Running clock second half, 70-0 the final.
Yeah, 10 touchdowns is hard to do against air. That's all you could say. 10 touchdowns is hard to do with nobody out there. I mean, that's a workout in itself. The problem that we're going to see, and we're going to talk about it, and we have talked about it, and there's no need to run a trick play, is, what does Shelby do each week to motivate themselves to have a great practice? Hey, guys, last week we played Cherryville, this week we have, and, how do you motivate? And what you keep trying to do is improve upon yourself each week. But, I mean, when you're watching the highlights here, how's even Coach Wilbanks going to go in and say, all right, guys, we need to work on this? Well, you just scored 10 touchdowns. It's hard to go.
Paul, one thing I think I did hear him saying on the radio Friday night is I think Farmer's first 5 touchdown passes were to 5 different guys. So at least, if nothing else, kind of to Coach's point, you spread it around and try to get as many people involved in it as you can.
Yeah, I like that comment, David. You're exactly right. They get so many people involved. And going back to the QB for Shelby Farmer, he has now thrown somewhere between 1,100 to 1,200 already. and he's going to have a chance for those numbers to grow. Tristan Tate's going to have a chance for his rushing numbers to grow. Not only, I mean, they would be doing that if you're playing quality opponents, but in this current conference games, really, they can put up some big numbers and they can look real good and not even play in the second half if they don't want to.
No question about it. 70-0, the final in that one. Shelby over Cherryville. Golden Lions will play at Thomas Jefferson on Friday night. Again, we'll talk about that. We'll talk about all three of the games coming up as Burns is off. We'll talk about all three of those games when we come back. You're watching Armchair Quarterback.
The only prediction I'd make is I'd be pretty willing to bet I won't be doing it in 20 more years.
My question is, where's our residual checks?
144 have taken Republican ballots, and Wes and two others have taken Libertarian ballots.
Pravda, however, I mean TBS, however.
Wes.
Wes.
Ladies
and gentlemen, let's get ready to rumble!
Welcome back in for our second half of Armchair Quarterback. I'm David Allen, joined as always by Coach Guy Suttle and Paul Foster. We, the fun part of the program where we get to look ahead to this week, and we'll start with Burns because we always do go alphabetical order. Burns is off this week. So again, as I said in the first segment, don't have to worry about dealing with the weather for the Bulldogs this week. There we go, Crest and Stuart Kramer. Stuart Kramer coming off a beatdown of, I think it was final 44-7 against South Point. Crest obviously coming off the big win over Ashbrook on Friday night. Coach, this is a homecoming game for Stuart Kramer. Why in the world you'd schedule the Chargers for a homecoming game, I couldn't tell you. But regardless, this is not going to go well for Stuart Kramer on Friday night.
No, and I was a little surprised. You know, we were talking about Kings Mountain's homecoming. It was homecoming at Crest Friday night versus Ashbrook, which is a tough foe also. But like you said, Crest doesn't play in many homecoming games, and to say that they're going to spoil homecoming for Stuart Kramer, yeah, it's going to happen.
Well, and Stuart Kramer might be in a situation where they're just trying to find, you know, what date works best for them, because it really doesn't matter who they play. And, you know, Paul, I hate that for him, but, you know, again, it's kind of like the Burns and Shelby comments last week. You know, I like Crest by 45 in this one.
Well, you may not be very much off, David, one way or the other with going there. But let me also mention regarding Crest right quick that while we do expect them to be able to go to 5-0 most likely whenever that game is played, defensive lineman Bethune seriously injured in that last game. We know he's not going to be in this game, may not be playing the rest of the season, so our best wishes are with him. And I believe a guy by the name of Jahari Mosley is just really proving himself, the transfer from Chase. He can be an offensive weapon, but what he's done defensively, one of the leading tacklers for Crest defense, something to continue to keep an eye on.
All right, so that's Crest at Stuart Kramer. Again, it's Kramer's homecoming, so we're not real sure what that possibility will look like if that game gets moved off Friday. It could possibly go to Monday. We do know that Crest and Kramer JVs will play Wednesday night at Crest. I think that game for sure, in my comment or my communication with Jeff Melton today, has already been moved. So Crest and Kramer JVs at Crest on Wednesday night, and then we'll have to wait till later in the week to find out about the varsity game. Kings Mountain at North Gaston. Kings Mountain, this is former Mountaineer defensive coordinator Darrell Wilson is now the head coach at North Gaston. And coach, he's 2-2 on the season, which when you look at the record, you say, hey, he's got North Gaston going in the right direction. But his losses are to Bessemer City, a 1A team, which is probably the best 1A team we'll see in the conference with Shelby and Burns. But they lost to Forest View on Friday night, 14-7.
Yeah, it's not sure exactly what's going on with North Gaston. Like you say, with 2-2 playing 500 ball, you'd think, well, this is going to be a respectable game, and then they come up and lose like they did to Forest View. I'm just not sure what to expect out of this game. Kings Mountain again, going to take care of themselves. I mean, that's how you get through this part of the season, is working on your stuff, because and Shelby and Burns are prime examples. You're just going to concentrate on your team this week.
Well, and Paul, one of the things that what do you focus on? Well, Coach Herron's going to be focused on special teams because they gave up a kickoff touchdown to Hunter Huss. So even though they won 39-13, and even though the game wasn't really close, they got some stuff to clean up. You saw even on the highlight package, you had one situation where a receiver fumbled the football way down the field, but because he was lucky enough to get up and go get it, he was still able to pick it up and run it in for the touchdown. So those are the little things that Coach Herron will be harping on this week in practice.
I'm sure he will. That's an excellent point. Yeah, I didn't get a chance to jump in there on that highlight, but you're right. That receiver was very fortunate. And, against some other competition, that ball could have been going in the other direction instead of still end up being a touchdown. Again, with the ability of quarterback Armstrong, over 800 yards passing, and Vaughn, the receiver, over 500 yards receiving. The two of them are going to be dangerous enough, and we'll see if they're clicking again on Friday night.
Absolutely. So, again, not that anybody's paying any attention to my picks, but I got Kings Mountain by a slew in this one. So we'll see. Coach Wilson, though, will have the defense from North Gaston, you would think, clicking at least a little bit there. There's the last game of the group, Thomas Jefferson at Shelby. I think I said Shelby at Thomas Jefferson earlier. That is correct. It is Thomas Jefferson at Shelby on Friday night. Golden Lions coming off that 70-0 win over Cherryville. Thomas Jefferson coming off a 56 to, no, it was bad, whatever it was. I don't remember the score, but Shelby, Bessemer City beat them 56-8, I think, or 58-6.
And like you said, that's the best 1A school.
No doubt.
And they're probably going to be going against, nothing against Burns yet, but as far as they're concerned, the best 2A school that they're going to meet certainly in this early season. My question is who are the two teams that they beat? So when they roll into Shelby, it's going to be a long night for them, whichever night that is. Thomas Jefferson's going to have their hands full. Farmer's going to, we talked about the 10 touchdowns. The first 5 were to 5 different receivers. So, he's going to spread the ball around again, and Tate's going to run for as much as he wants to.
So again, if you are a fan of Shelby, Kings Mountain, or Crest, just pay attention to the school website, the school Twitter feed, et cetera, as far as what the schedule is going to look like, because we could get a lot of rain at the end of the week, and if we do, that could really mess up our Friday night schedule. There you see the schedule one more time. Burns on the bye, Crest at Stuart Kramer, Kings Mountain at North Gaston, Thomas Jefferson at Shelby. Now, let's talk about Gardner-Webb. Got their first win of the season. First-year head coach gets the dub finally after 3 really tough losses, and they got Presbyterian. They got Tennessee Tech coming up this week. Paul, don't know that much about Tennessee Tech, but, you would like to think that Gardner-Webb has positioned themselves with 3 really tough losses followed by the win, that they'll be in good shape going against Tennessee Tech.
Yeah, I think so, David. We were already proud of what Gardner-Webb was doing in those weeks. They were losing close ones. Remember Walford, James Madison, a name I'm sure we'll bring up again in a moment, played them 13-7. And of course, losing to Charlotte at the very end, those were all tough. But in that game, the win at Presbyterian, time of possession was big for Gardner-Webb. Over 37 minutes in that game. They had over 500 total offense, so a good combination of the run and the pass. So they're building on a lot over there at GWU right now.
All right, so check them out. Again, Gardner-Webb, Tennessee Tech this coming weekend. And since Paul had to go ahead and throw James Madison out there, Gardner-Webb held James Madison to 13 points 2 weeks ago. They put 70 on the Tar Heels on Saturday, Coach. I text you guys on Saturday while I'm on the lawnmower because I was so put out I had to go get on the lawnmower. That might have been the worst half of football in the University of North Carolina football history, and that's saying something because they've been playing football at Carolina a long time.
Now, and maybe the defense coordinator at Gardner-Webb's on his way up the ladder after that one. It's hard to say. But it just shows you how teams can get really pumped to go and play a big-time program that maybe they were not quite as motivated against Gardner-Webb. And it also shows how big-time programs can look down on the little guy and say, hey, guy, you better practice, listen close to what coach says because you will probably be in the second quarter.
Well,
it just flipped on them. And once JMU got on that roll, it wasn't any stopping them.
Paul, one of the comments that was made after the game, I think, is telling to why the game happened the way it did. Mac Brown was quoted after the game saying, we should never lose to a group of 5 team, meaning James Madison. To me, that was probably the attitude that had been conveyed all week in practice, and because it was conveyed all week in practice, that's what showed up on Saturday afternoon. No excitement, no effort, no anything, and it was an absolute atrocity what happened to the Carolina defense on Saturday.
Yeah, it really was. You think about the pass coverage to begin with because they were getting burned in that first half by a lot of deep passes, and James Madison was just hitting their guys. Like Guy said, you get up for this opponent, you're playing in Chapel Hill, this is a big moment for you, and they were able to live up to it. They could try to do that again and may never accomplish it, but there's things for the Tar Heels to work on, more on the defensive end for sure. And I think another thing that was just strange, we could expect this at some stadiums, if it be Duke or other places, that you had a decent crowd in and you're going to get beat at halftime. It was unusual watching that game, being that even when the Tar Heels are down in football or basketball, the fans are still there. How many empty seats were out there? So I think everybody, just says, hey, this is an awakening. We can do better and be better, and they probably will.
Well, I don't know. We'll see. It was bad Saturday. 70-50, 120 points. I mean, unbelievable. State and Clemson wasn't much better. At least Clemson is a top 25 team that State went and got drilled by. But I'm telling you, Duke's got to be, at least at this point, unless it's Johnson C. Smith that's 4-0 over in Charlotte, got to be the best team in North Carolina because Appalachian got absolutely throttled on Thursday night to South Alabama. So really, it's a bad time to be a college football team in North Carolina, that is for sure. Big game on this coming weekend, though, as we've spent all that time talking about what happened to the Tar Heels on Saturday. Georgia and Alabama, Coach, that ought to be a good one.
Yeah, and the other thing that's really interesting about this game is they both had bye weeks. So they've been working on each other for 2 weeks, rolling into Saturday night at Alabama. So it's going to be tough for Georgia to roll in there. To me, this is I don't know, because we have never had a group of 12 in the playoffs. This could possibly be a third-round game that we're going to see this Saturday night in Tuscaloosa. So, a lot at stake. I think it's 1 versus 4, and it's going to be a great atmosphere. We know what people that roll into Alabama, what happens to them. I do not see Georgia being intimidated.
Well, obviously we know what Coach Kirby Smart has done in the series since he took over at Georgia. Coach Kalen DeBoer's first chance, Paul, in this one for Alabama, so obviously should be interesting.
Yeah, Alabama with a brand new coach after Nick Saban there for so long. That's going to be the unusual thing is in this battle, a brand new man on one side between Georgia and Alabama. And, man, you talk about the ratings through the roof. Let's hope the game lives up to it.
Absolutely. So we'll keep an eye on that. Now we'll spend this last couple minutes talking about the Carolina Panthers. Coach Dave Canales made a decision this past week to bench Bryce Young, start Andy Dalton, and I mean, they were 2 drives into the ball game yesterday, and I was calling my boys saying, well, I guess it really was Bryce Young, Coach.
I guess it was because even the commentators that were calling the game were talking about Carolina's, listen carefully, Carolina's offensive line was dominating the defensive front. Kudos. And you don't hear me say that much about the Panthers' offensive line, but they did well. They did dominate the front, and they were able to push them around, and there we go. And so, maybe Andy's presence in the huddle, being a little more assertive, authoritative, just a bigger figure. I mean, Bryce is a small guy, even by any standards. And here comes Andy and says, all right, fellas, here's what we're going to do.
Well, Paul, one of the things that he did was he made some really good throws, specifically the touchdown throw to Deontay Johnson, which he kind of had to put some loft and get it over the top. The one he threw to Adam Thielen that Thielen ended up pulling his hamstring on because he really had to lean out for it or stretch out for it. I mean, those two balls were as good of footballs as you'll see thrown at any level at any time. And it just happened to be for a Carolina Panther quarterback yesterday.
Yeah, and we know Andy Dalton was there so many times in his past career. Of course, spent all those years with the Cincinnati Bengals as their starting quarterback. What bothers you, even when the veteran is having a veteran, is when they've been sitting so long. And, I heard one statement saying that he'd even been praying, I hope I'll get another opportunity. I don't know if he even thought that would happen in Carolina. He might have thought maybe I'll go to one more team and be on the sideline. But, man, did he ever come through. And I got to give him a lot of credit because you didn't see rust. He came right out of the gate and put us in a place we're not used to. Carolina on top, and then it even carried over to the defense. Like you said, Guy, the offensive line, everybody seemed more enthusiastic. The defense, everybody just came together, and you could hear that in the coaching staff at the end of the game as well.
One of the interesting posts I saw on Facebook yesterday is the Panthers and the Cowboys have the same record, 1-2.
Exactly.
Speaking of my Cowboys, not a good showing yesterday, although they came back and tightened it up late. They needed a stop to try and tie it up, and they couldn't get one. Dallas is one of those teams. I heard some guys on ESPN talking about it this morning. If they get up on you early, they're made for that. They got the kind of pass rush and whatnot that can really get after a quarterback. But if you get behind early and can't stop the run, and Derrick Henry ran all over the top of them yesterday.
Yeah, and that's going to be a problem. And you said it exactly. Their defense, if they have the lead, their defense is going to put a lot of pressure on you. If you're behind and they want to just run the clock, take the air out of the ball, they can do that really, really well. So it's going to be interesting. The other question for me is, and I know we don't have much time, is Kansas City going to win a game that doesn't have an officiating controversy? That's my only question.
Well, Kansas City's 3-0, and they're the defended two-time Super Bowl champions, so until somebody beats them, they're still where they are. I think some of the other questions that are really interesting is you got Pittsburgh with the quarterback controversy. They're 3-0. You got Minnesota with Sam Darnold at quarterback. They're undefeated. So you've got some really kind of interesting storylines going on in the NFL right now. I think it will be interesting to see how this stuff all shakes out. And then, you got games that don't make any sense at all. The Rams were 2 touchdowns behind the 49ers, and they came back and won that yesterday, Paul.
I know every time I think I got something figured out with the NFL, I don't. If you'd go back to how good Dallas looked in that opening game, I mean, everybody was talking about this is the Dallas we've been waiting on. Maybe this is going to be a team that will compete for a Super Bowl. And now you're scratching your head, but what else is new?
That's exactly right. The NFL is a lot of fun to watch and a lot of fun to try and figure out. But, hey, that's all the time we have for this week on Armchair Quarterback. Join us right here next week on Armchair Quarterback.